No way. You guys really do your research.
So, two, thank you so much for coming on to Rising Giants today. You are the investment manager and Southeast Asia lead at Seedstars and have been there for a couple of years now. Your background also consists of going up through the ranks at 500 Global and working at AWS as a scout too. So, very excited to have your perspectives on the Southeast Asia region, especially in Bangkok, from the investment perspective. Um, Before we get started into all of that information and all of that, I do want to ask you a quick question.
Sure.
Before working in the investment scene, I was doing a little bit of research, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were part of a band at one point. Is that right?
Oh, no
At
way.
least. No, I believe you were a guitarist, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if
Yes,
you still
yes.
are. Yeah, so it would be cool to hear a little bit about your dip into the music scene a little bit that I came across on SoundCloud.
No way. You guys really do your research. I mean, first of all, Dom and Max, thanks for having me here. Excited to have this chat with you guys. So the thing with the guitar in the band was during high school. Obviously, you try out a lot of instruments. I was just kind of playing guitar on my own in the house, and my friends at school they had a band, and then the guitarist left. So the spot kind of opened up for me, and then yeah, kind of joined the band. We played for a couple of years before leaving high school, and we were actually participating in a couple of like competitions between international schools in Bangkok. And unfortunately, we actually won two or three of them. So that was a good experience, but I say that was mostly from my bandmates because I'm definitely not a musician by trade.
Okay, fair enough. No, I feel like that's a great experience. Though I myself actually I had a couple friends that we got together and also did something similar, but we were nowhere
Nice.
near as good as you guys winning competitions and almost becoming like the next Led Zeppelin or something like that. So
Nice. I'm surprised you guys found out. I haven't spoken to anyone about this for ages.
hey, you know what? Google's a crazy place. So we'll when doing research, it's always fun to come across those little nuggets
Nice.
of information. But kind of going back into it after high
Yeah.
school, after becoming, after the band and going into university and everything, it'd be great
Yeah.
to talk a little bit about your educational journey and
Yeah.
what particularly interested you in entering the investment space.
Sure. I mean, grew up in Thailand, and then after high school went to Chulalongkorn University for a finance degree. So just when I was growing up, both my parents previously worked at a bank. A couple other family members also worked at a bank as well. So was kind of exposed to the industry from a young age, and there were a couple of small events here and there that kind of made me really interested in investments and investment management. Right. I think back in the day when I was like 7 or 8 years old, there was an envelope sent to the house, and dad just opened it up. It was cash. It was dividends from his investments. Back when they were still sending cash envelopes, and those little things kind of piqued my interest in the space. And before joining university, the choice was between engineering and finance, right? So I picked up a couple books on each topic, and my natural kind of interest leaned more towards finance. Um, so I had this knack of listening to a lot of interviews from fund managers, and hearing their stories and whatnot. And I think it's exciting to kind of invest in a company, help them be active in the company. But those were more from activist investors like the Bill Ackmans of the world, the Carl Icahns. So had this ambition to kind of go into the buy side eventually. Unfortunately, in Thailand, the market's not that big. There's only a couple of PE funds around, a couple of hedge funds around, unlike markets like Singapore or Hong Kong. So my initial plan was to go into investment banking for a couple of years, and then find my way into the buy side later on, right? And I can get into the pivot into the VC world if you like.
Yeah,
So
actually,
yeah,
I was going to ask you. It's funny because you already had mentioned it. But I was going to ask you what were the or who were the fund managers that you were particularly keen on listening in on, but you already covered that. The more of the
yeah.
activist buy side folks. So, but yeah, great to dive into the pivot to VC.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I did my internship at the investment banking house. Very typical route. And just before graduating, right? I was always on like these tech publications, like Tech in Asia and whatnot, and just randomly scrolling through their job boards. And before graduating, I wanted to make a few extra bucks, right? So saw this role for a program manager for an accelerator. Didn't know much about it, to be honest, but just took a shot, applied, and talked to the guys. And fortunately, they offered me the job. I told them that I was still studying. I'll go to uni 2 3 days a week, and then the rest I'll go into the office. Fortunately, that worked for them, so I joined them a couple months before I graduated, and essentially it was a impact focused accelerator out of Singapore, which wanted to expand into Thailand. And I was essentially the kind of first employee working with the country manager here. So that was kind of the first foray into the whole kind of startup scene or startup ecosystem in Thailand, which was still relatively nascent back then, 2016, 2017. So there was a kind of first wave of a couple of startups. 500 was just starting out in 2015, so still very early days. So did that for over a year. Um, Really good experience. I mean, I was this 19, 20-year-old kid, didn't know much, was going to events almost every week, talking to anyone who would, talk to me. And then after a year or so running through three batches, the opportunity with 500 came up, right? And it was kind of perfect since I've had this background in finance, a little bit in investment management, plus I've already started to develop my network in the startup ecosystem. I kind of knew who most of the players were, and had a good grasp of the ecosystem already. So kind of those two experience and network kind of merge beautifully for me to kind of hop on to join the guys at 500.
Hmm. And what were some of the factors that specifically pulled you to 500? Did understanding that you initially had a lot of experience on the impact side, was there something from there that attracted you to join, or was it a lot of the people that were currently there that you were speaking with? Be great to
Yeah.
learn a little bit more there.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, 500 was essentially the most prominent VC locally here in Thailand, right? They just finished investing out their first fund, 50 or so investment, and they were kind of the only non-CVC, if you will, in the market that's kind of actively investing, right? So I think that's one. When you work at a VC, at least for me personally, I want to be active. I don't want to be doing one deal a year or two deals a year, right? In addition to that, the GPs there were amazing, right? Really experienced, really smart people, and I've learned a tremendous ton from them. And I guess the third thing is, being part of this larger 500 organization, which they have footprint all over the world. We have sister funds around Southeast Asia as well, and obviously there's that connection to Silicon Valley. So yeah, I think those three factors, and just the people in general as well, getting the chance to work with some of the existing portfolio as well. Which, I mean, if you guys know, some of the best performing companies in Thailand are their portfolio, and these guys were most of the time the first check into these companies, right?
Were there any companies that are deals that you worked on specifically, or that you're particularly excited about that you invested in that you'd like to talk about
At 500,
at 500? Yeah.
guys, I'm not sure I want to talk about the portfolio at 500 actually.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
we can cut that out,
No
right? I
problem.
mean, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, of course, no problem.
yeah.
Um,
No, I'm happy to chat about it, but it's just like I don't know if we put it out. I don't want to be talking about, you know.
Yeah,
companies outside of my portfolio right now.
fair enough. Um,
Yeah.
so, yep. So, fast forwarding through your time at 500 Global, can you provide a little bit of insight on uh, what was it that led you to your next role at Seedstars and becoming the investment manager there?
Right. Of course. So at 500, I was specifically working for the Thai fund, right? So the main focus was on the Thai market. So after spending, close to 5 years in the market, um, one of the things that kind of people were always talking about was that Thai startups, one of the main challenges that these companies struggle to expand abroad or regionally, right? And we're seeing all this attention getting diverted to Indonesia, Vietnam. I just wanted, to learn about those markets, develop my network in the other markets, and just kind of expand my horizons. And hopefully, in the future, take some of those learnings and network to help, Thai companies kind of get over that hurdle of expanding in the region as well, right? So I think the main thing for me was to get more of a regional exposure, which this role at Seedstars is. It's a Southeast Asia coverage, and just to get into the fund a bit more at the ground level, where 500, was has been actively investing for almost 10 years now to date, from the Thai fund. Whereas Seedstars, we've been around for more than 10 years as well, right? But the investment and capital side of things started a bit more recently. So I think the challenge of kind of building things up from the ground up was also another draw for me.
Okay, awesome. And could you talk to us about what a day in life would be like for you, in your position now?
Yeah,
Is there any are there any like stress points that you think about
yeah,
consistently, or anything like that?
yeah. It's funny you ask because we actually track these things internally in terms of how much time we spend on certain things. But as you know, right, the VC job is not really a routine one. But like I'll take this week for an example, right? So we spend most of our time on pipeline, so talking to companies. So this week must be at least 5 or 6 first calls, and then if we do take any companies forward in the process, we do a second call or a deep dive, right, which lasts 2.5 hour, much longer than the first call, which is typically 30 to 40 minutes. So this week, 5 or 6 first calls. We have one deep dive tomorrow with an Indonesian company, and then on the other side, it's we spend around 30% of the time networking. So when we make investments, typically as early stage investors, with smaller tickets as well, we co-invest with multiple funds, right? So it's just keeping up and growing the network with VCs, ecosystem players, and whatnot. And I think especially at the early stages, it's not like the public markets where information is published, information is easily gathered through online channels, right? Um, I might know more about the Thai market or certain models here. A friend at another fund might know more about ed tech in Vietnam, right? So that's the sharing of notes, sharing of insights. I think is also a healthy component of the ecosystem. So pipeline networking, every week, we also spend a couple hours on our fund strategy, so deep diving into certain verticals that we're interested in. And obviously, other than that, there's a bit of bookkeeping and housekeeping. We're very process driven at Seedstars. We try to track everything. So just spending a couple hours each week, making sure the data is uploaded where it should be, and analyzing and seeing results from different experiments that we run.
Mhm. And from Seedstar size, what are the typical ticket sizes that you're looking at, and are there any particular co-investors that you like to work with?
Yeah, for sure. So we invest in pre-seed and seed companies. So our check size ranges from 100K to 300K. Um, so typically, a pre-seed round could be anywhere from 300K up to 1.5, 2 million round for bigger seed rounds, right? So you know, uh, other invest we've invested in with multiple funds actually. With the second fund, we're up to 12 companies so far, um, and that's with probably 20 plus funds, right? So a few common names. I think we've co-invested in, I think, one or two deals with Gobi, one with M Ventures, Wavemaker as well, and a couple other funds, right? These
Mhm.
typical names that you would often see in all the publications.
Okay, great. And of the 12 investments that you've done so far,
Yeah,
what has been like the geographical kind of focus that you've ended up kind of leaning into as time has gone on, and maybe how has that
yeah,
shifted since you first conceived of like the geographic
yeah.
focus?
So portfolio construction right now, in Southeast Asia specifically, around half the companies are in um, are in Indonesia, and the rest is spread out around the region, right? So we have a couple in the Philippines, um, one in Thailand, fortunately, and then a couple regional companies that are operating in multiple countries.
Hmm. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, initially
that's
when we sorry, Max, when we were starting out, almost 2 years ago, the market in Indonesia was still very hot, and valuations were quite lofty. So we've kind of went a bit patient on the market until valuations came down. But obviously, Indonesia is one of our main markets now.
hmm, hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. We were just looking today at what the pre-seed, like what the average pre-seed valuations look like in Southeast Asia. This
Yeah.
report by Equidum, and it was we
Okay.
were just
What
looking
are
at
the numbers?
Q1. Yeah, so Q1
Yeah.
2024, we were noticing that well, for the data that they have, it gone down minus 40% from Q4 of last year,
Yeah.
and so the average pre-seed valuation in Southeast Asia was 3.7 million for, and they define pre-seed as revenue of less than 200K. So I'm curious, is that kind of what you're seeing as of today in Southeast
Yeah.
Asia? What's the kind of what are the valuations that you're seeing in 2024?
Yeah. I mean, I think the data that we saw for Q1 aligns with what you've seen. So obviously there was a big drop after the funding winter, but then the ecosystems actually picked up a bit of momentum throughout last year. Um, and then unfortunately Q1 this year, kind of the momentum was kind of lost again, and markets were really slow. So as a result, I'm not surprised that average valuations for pre-seed has come down a little bit. I wouldn't say valuations are super depressed. I think it's at a reasonable level. So generally pre-seed rounds, from 3 to 5, we're not seeing rounds valued at 1 or 1.5 or 2 million, right? Those are a bit more rare. So I think pre-seed round of 3 to 5 is still kind of within the reasonable range. It's not super depressed that founders are diluting too much. But just given
Hmm.
the nature of the market, if nobody's is investing, well, valuations might come down a little bit more.
Well, what's interesting is, me and Dom, obviously, Rising Giants, we started off, well, we're still very much like focused on like the emerging startup ecosystem in
Yeah.
Cambodia, and the average pre-seed valuations here are, less than a million. So it's, obviously, a bit of a different setup. I think it's the same as kind of what Myanmar was like
Yeah.
prior to when they were going through their kind of first wave. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious though, so you said you're focused quite a lot on Indonesia. What of the other emerging economies in the region do you kind of have a kind of maybe a non-consensus view on, or are there any particular countries that you think um, require more attention from like the VC community?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, just to set the context, right? Obviously, Indonesia, has all the capital and the attention. Um, we leave Singapore out of the conversation here, right? And obviously, a lot of that attention and capital is flowing into markets like Vietnam and Philippines for good reasons, right? Um, I'd say the non-consensus view is that markets like Thailand and even maybe Malaysia, I think there's still a lot of pockets of opportunities here, right? And Thailand, we actually had a lot of regional funds setting up local offices here before COVID, right? But after COVID, unfortunately, a few of them have left. But I'm starting to see the interest kind of flowing back into the ecosystem. Every month, there's at least one or two regional VCs flying in here to see what deals are available. And it's a market that's kind of been overlooked in recent years, right? But I'm quite optimistic, especially seeing the younger generations, kind of the quality of talent that are now coming out of the university. I think in the longer term, Thailand has the right ingredients to build successful companies, right? And we've had success cases before, right? We've had companies that have proven that it can be done. So yeah, I would say Thailand.
That's yeah. We also like have a similar view there. Like see it as this like second wave that's starting to build, and maybe of the new founders that are coming through. Um, there seems to be more of a focus on building international startups that maybe won't be 100% focused on Thailand and raising the corporate VC money, and maybe they're
Yeah,
more focused on like Bangkok being their hub for the
yeah,
region and then scaling. So we find that like
yeah.
quite an interesting trend.
Yeah, exactly. There's been like a couple companies that just skipped the local investors and were able to raise, pre-seed rounds from regional investors already, right? And I mean, once you have that on your cap table, obviously that helps a lot with international expansion where you can tap into, a local VCs network in another market like Vietnam or Indonesia. So yeah, I think that's definitely positive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and are there any particular like portfolio companies that you want to sort of highlight within the 12 investments that you've made so far? Would just be interested to hear kind of some of the problems that they're looking to solve and some of the traction so far.
Definitely. So I think one to point out is Banico, which recently released their funding news a couple of days ago. So as the problem with EV is how the critical minerals are mined, right? And you're only one Google search away from seeing how horrific the environmental and social impacts um, you know that they're creating. And to make EVs truly green, we have to look at the supply chain as well, right? So this company has developed a new way to extract nickel for use in EV batteries, right? And this is a team of Indonesians who were scientists in the valley, worked at deep tech companies before, and have now kind of developed the solution in the US and now bringing it to Indonesia. So they're building a pilot facility right now, and essentially the solution is a closed loop solution where it doesn't put the corrosive waste in the surrounding environments, uses much less water and energy, so it extracts nickel in a much more effective way, much more cost effective way as well, and just much more sustainable, right? And it's something that I think is really needed in the market. Indonesia is making a big push for EVs. Elon Musk was just there, I think, in the last week, and the government is pushing for companies to build the whole supply chain there. So I think technologies like this can make a huge impact, but also become great businesses as well, right? Because it's a huge market. Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a really unique. That sounds like a very unique company in that like that's not when you think of VC, you kind of it doesn't
yeah,
you don't necessarily think of like commodities and nickel and things like that. So that sounds yeah, it sounds like a really interesting investment that you're involved with. Does Seedstars have a kind of an ESG lens as well as like think screening their investments beyond financial
yeah,
returns?
yeah. No, definitely. I think it's in the DNA of the organization. And impact has always kind of been embedded from the start, right? When CSAR started out, we were kind of the one of the earliest proponents of these emerging ecosystems all around the world, right? Obviously we were going to places like Myanmar and Cambodia, holding events there, flying VCs in before others even paid attention. And once we started the fund, obviously, you know, when we make investment, there's an impact angle that we assess companies through as well. And it's not only pushed internally from the organization, but our LPs are these big institutions, right? Where obviously they also invest with an impact angle. So we avoid things that clearly doesn't have an impact. So things like entertainment and gaming is not within our thesis. I think a lot of companies that are building in emerging markets have impact embedded within them already. But for us, we want to invest in things that excites us as well, right? So apart from Banacol, which I just mentioned, we have a couple other companies that are you could classify as impact as well, right? We have two companies in the circular economy space. One called Humble in the Philippines. So they essentially take laptops and devices from companies that would throw them away. They actually help them generate revenues from that and recirculate it to other companies who could still use it, right? Because these companies generally they have a policy that they have to change or update the devices every 3 or 4 years, where the device's lifetime is much longer than that. The other company is Cinch out of Singapore. So it's a electric subscription model similar to Grover in Europe. So yeah, we've made a lot of bets in the kind of sustainability space as well, and we're definitely seeing a lot more interest and capital that's waiting to invest in these kind of companies, right? Which also gives us more comfort investing at seed, knowing that the capital will be there if these companies actually do perform.
Mm-hmm. And looking down the growth chain of a company past the seed stage, what is kind of the strategy for Seedstars? Is there typically a plan to exit at a later stage, or at a certain point, if the company plans to IPO, do you wait until that point? Just wondering where kind of where that strategy is for
Yeah,
Seedstars.
definitely. So when we make investments, it's a long-term partnership with the companies, right? So we're definitely looking to stay within the cap table for at least 5, 6, 7 years. I think once within the structure of the fund, once we get to year 6 or year 7 of the fund, then we have those couple years left to start divesting, right? And then if there's no potential acquirer in sight or roadmap to an IPO, then we might have to consider selling secondaries, which fortunately I think the market for secondaries in Southeast Asia is becoming a bit more developed. I think, which is great for the ecosystem overall. I think there's some other funds who run a slightly different strategy where they come in super early and they exit, before any liquidity event. But for us, I think the goal is to stay and stick with the company in the longer term.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, the long term partnership also helps with the kind of support that you'll be able to bring to to the company at the early stage to help kind of supercharge that growth too. So when assessing startups, what are some of the what are some of the warning signs or some of the red flags that may deter you from wanting to to further pursue that investment? Maybe just starting there.
Yeah, of course. So I think the obvious red flags, like misrepresenting your financials and whatnot, I think those are clear. But for me, I wouldn't say this is a red flag, but say an orange or yellow flag. I think assessing the founder's commitment, it's always a bit subjective, but I think it's something super important that I've learned throughout the years to kind of make sure. Just because founders are entering into this journey, it's a long-term commitment. It's at least 5 years of hard work, right? And as you guys know, the life of a founder is not you know it's not a comfortable, it's not an easy life, right? So just making sure that the founder is actually committed, they have a strong why or reason why they're building this company, rather than just becoming a founder just for its sake, just because you're seeing everybody else doing it, right? Because when things get hard, and more often than not things do get hard, if you're not committed, I've seen a lot of founders kind of give up along the way. So I think for me, commitment is a big thing. The other thing is just the whole journey, right? the journey has to make sense in some ways, right? When you listen to a founder's background, um, for example, at 500, we invested in this company called Lemonade. So the founder grew up, his family business was a secondhand car dealership. He studied automotive in Germany. Before starting his own company, he was country manager for Carsum in Thailand. So looking at the whole journey, if you were to say, I'm going to start a startup in agri-tech, that doesn't make sense, right? He actually went on and started a company which essentially builds the whole tech stack for secondhand dealerships. And, those kind of background stories and journeys, I think there has to be a fit between what the founder is building and the market as well, right? So I think those are the two things that I really look out for.
Yeah, those are both really great, really great focuses when doing your initial due diligence on founders. One of the things that Max and I have also come across is that um, there can be times where founders are working on multiple projects at once, and so that does have a bit of an impact on um, not only the overall commitment to the main business, but also just in terms of focus and and just
Yeah,
resources and time. And so that is that is a bit of like a yellow or orange flag that we do see
yeah,
too. Mhm.
exactly. I mean, if you're not fully committed, it's tough to go and ask for capital from other parties, right? If you're not 100% with the company. I think it's somewhat understandable pre-seed, pre-raise. But I think, at the very least, once you raise your first round, then, the commitment should be 100%.
Yeah, definitely. And then on the other side, what are some of the green flags or positive indicators that would capture your interest of a founder?
Just generally a deep experience or understanding of what they're building, right, and the ability to articulate it well. I think generally the best founders, they know their market really well. They see a pocket of opportunity that, the market is shifting, and this brings up, a new opportunity, and, they're the best ones to tackle it. Another kind of mental model that I use is, the principle here is that, you know if anybody wins in the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem wins, right? If a startup is successful, even though it's not from our portfolio, you know, there's more capital in the market. You could recycle the talent, the capital, and you bring more attention to the market. So, whenever you're able to help anyone and doesn't actually cost you too much time and effort, you try to do it. You don't even have to think about whether it comes back or not, because eventually I think it all does. And especially in the startup scene, when you help connect people, you're actually helping two people, right? You're not just helping the one asking. So even if we see a company that we can invest in, whether it's too late stage for us or not within the verticals that we focus on, if you can connect them to an investor who's a better fit, you're actually doing both parties a favor, right? And you're also building relationships for yourself as well. So my principle would be just to give whenever you can, and in general, just try to help out, because if anybody is successful, you need the whole ecosystem to be successful, right? If everybody else fails and you're the only VC around, you're also not gonna be able to deliver the returns that you need to.
Right. Yeah, that's such an important piece of it is taking the approach of, as you mentioned, with it's like a win-win relationships.
Yeah,
It's there's always a way that one can help the other in some fact or fashion. So having that approach and open mind is really a strong characteristic to have, especially as an investor too, because yeah, like you said, you never know when you never know when someone that you've spoken with in the past may have a warm intro to somebody that you would like
yeah.
to have a conversation with, or vice versa. So it's that's a really great point. And I guess in part of that, are there any memorable lessons or insights that you've gained with through your interactions with either founders or other peers within the industry?
I think generally bottom line is just don't be an asshole, right? I've never seen that worked out for anyone. Right, and it's a small. I mean, there's a lot of people in the ecosystem, but it's still relatively small, even if you look at the Southeast Asia level. And so, you know, if you act unethically or if you screw somebody over, and I've never seen it work out, right? So, um, and there's some epic failures that has happened in the ecosystem before. So I think just in general, the key lesson for me is you know just to not screw anyone over, and just try to be as supportive to everyone in the ecosystem as you can, because I guess that's why we use the word ecosystem as well, because there's dependencies on each other.
Got it. I mean, very clear cut and to the point there, which makes sense. And our traditional closing question that we like to ask each of our guests is, what is the greatest piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think I've been fortunate to be able to kind of get mentorship from so many people. I think both, from people I know in real life, and obviously, guys you consume content from in the internet. But I think if I had to pick one, it's long-term thinking. I think if you look at a lot of the successful people, they'll point to the same thing in terms of having this long-term thinking, which I guess relates to what I'm doing in the VC world as well, right? We're investing for the long term. We're playing long-term games with long-term people, and just having that wisdom to kind of, when you're making a decision, to take in the context of the long term as well, being able to defer enjoyment, defer certain values, take the short-term pain for obviously the long-term gain. And I think this kind of thinking relates with compounding, right? Obviously, we all know about compound interest, but I think a lot of other things in your life also compounds, right? I think one of the things one of my ex-GP taught me was that if you look at your key pillars in life, whether it be money, career, um, your relationships, your health, and your kind of mental well-being, if you can compound that, make sure you get at least a little bit better, or at the very worst not you know deteriorate on each of the five pillars every day, you're gonna do fine in life, right? So I think those are the two things I think would encourage people to keep in mind, if I can be helpful.
That reminds me of this guy Naval Ravikant. Do you follow him?
Yep,
Yeah, yeah. They just said
he's
some of the
amazing.
stuff that you said there. Yeah, he's a really interesting thinker that is able to like combine like philosophy and just general life advice.
Yep,
So yeah, that's great to hear. On that note, we really want to
amazing.
thank you for taking the time to join Dom and I on Rising Giants, learning a lot about some of these dynamics at play in the startup ecosystems in the region. So yeah, looking forward to what Seedstars will do with their portfolio and all the development in the Thailand ecosystem, especially. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for having
Yeah.
me.